Hello everybody, Scott here. Today's video is going to be a quick overview of the Sega Game Gear model that I did recently. I'm not going to go over everything, but just real quick, just want to give some insights into how I handle this. Now, at various parts of this process, I ended up using ZBrush, I ended up using Substance Painter, I ended up using Marmoset Toolbag, and I ended up scrapping pretty much everything that I used in those programs, and I ended up just making it just a portfolio piece for just modeling, essentially. As you see on the screen here, these are the final model renders that I did. I just modeled it in white, and now let's go ahead in the Blender file here. You see I have this sunlight here off to the side at an angle, so it's just kind of like the sun's coming down. Other than that, if you go into the world, I just have this HDR in the background. So now I'm going to go into the viewport shading here, and you can see I just have a nice clean white material on this. This HDR is giving me a bit of a nice environment shadow here. Pretty happy with the way that turned out. You see the details here, like these are where you would plug the headphones in. This is, one of these is volume, the other one is screen brightness. These are wheels. If you're not familiar with the Sega Game Gear, it's a handheld from the 90s. This was obviously the cartridge you put in the back. I'm not sure, this was a cap. When you took it off, I'm not sure what that attached to. It might have been like the radio thing that they had for it. I'm not sure. This is the power on and off switch. Start button, 1 and 2 buttons. And right here, this was the speaker. Obviously the D-pad. And the screen was super weird because this whole thing was encased. And let me go ahead and turn the rendering off here just so we can see it easier. This whole thing was encased in a clear screen protector that was thick. So I'm just turning it off here. So all this would be inside of that, if I remember correctly. I don't actually still have one. I had one back in the day and played the snot out of it. And this would be the power button. And all this was kind of recessed in, and this was where the actual screen was. Now the original D-pad, I worked on it multiple times. I actually sculpted it twice, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a year since I started this project. And I just kind of came back to it recently and finished it up. But I started off trying to use ZBrush for this, and I ended up scrapping the ZBrushing and just went ahead and just modeled this. Let me go ahead and just try to tab in edit mode here and modifiers. Trying to take these previews off of all these. Now you see what I have here is, this is all I actually have. Whoa. This is all I really have. Pretty simple, right? But then I have these simple deform bends. So it just protrudes it out just a little bit on the edges, because that's the way the original D-pad on the Sega Game Gear worked, so it was kind of pushed in the middle. And in case you're wondering, there is a mirror modifier on there, and the mirror is on both the X and the Z axis. See, if I click this on the X and on the Z, that's how I constructed that, and the subdivision set to 2 to smooth it all out. And you have this cylinder here, and this little thing here. I'm pretty sure I just took a sphere and just kind of did that. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and open this up and tab. Now what you'll see right away is that this was already, I already collapsed a level of subdivision prior to this. So you can see this has already been subdivided to some extent. And the reason for that is because I worked on this multiple times over the course of over a year. I modeled it in a number of styles and different variety of ways. I was experimenting with different directions. I did this originally, I'll throw it up on the screen. I did this originally with it as a AAA game art prop, and then I ended up trying like a low poly stylization, and then I ended up doing more of a 3D illustration style render. It was kind of bright and friendly looking, and then obviously in the end ended up just being just a modeling piece. And I did clean it up. There were a number of ways in which the model needed improved over time, but in the end I'm happy with where it is now. But in the process I ended up doing a lot of unorthodox things. Like I ended up having to remodel multiple parts of this multiple times, and including this, which is definitely the most annoying part of the whole process. And in case you're wondering, yes, I did use booleans. I did put a cylinder here, and I did repeat it. And this one here, as you can see, the ones that were here were not nearly as protruded in as these here were. And yes, this was a lot of work to connect these together. It was kind of annoying, but the most important thing is just that it looks right. Like if you look at it here, it's mostly smooth even without this subdivision surface preview on. Like I just worked it and worked it, and when you turn that on, now it's very smooth. Just wanted to get everything nice and cleaned up. Now over here, these were booleans as well. These obviously these buttons here, if I just hide these, obviously I boolean these in. Well, maybe it's not obvious. And I ended up, again, you're seeing some things collapsed on here, but I ended up making this rim, and I had this rim here, and I ended up just beveling it. And I just took this rim here, I ended up cleaning up all the junk here around the edges here, and then I just took this and I just beveled it to end up with this, and this. The reason for that is it just gives it a nice clean distance, because with all the junk around here, all these end-gons here, that's the concern point. Same thing with this over here. As you can see, this is even worse here with all the way that this the topology is changing, and the curvature of the model is changing, because this is such a weirdly shaped object. I did what I could, and I ended up getting it close enough so that it looked mostly good here, just a little rough there. But as soon as I turn on just a subdivision smooth of just one in the viewport, as you can see, you really have to go way close up to it to see any imperfection. So when I turn the buttons on from a distance, it's gonna look good. This is the start button here. Again, the wheels. Pretty simple, right? Power button. Again, I kind of went with the end-gon method there. I just beveled the edges and let it be smooth. This, again, I believe this is for the AC adapter. Now with the back, I don't know how to explain this, but it's been over a year since I worked on this back. You can see without the subdivision preview on, I obviously had a lot of subdivisions on this, and I collapsed them in. In other words, I applied the modifier. And again, this was booleaned in, this was booleaned in, this was booleaned in. These were a real pain, like trying to get this correct. In the earlier version, with the first version of this model, this shape here was super rough, and it was way too wide and way too soft. It had kind of a molten wax, melted lava look to it, and I ended up intentionally really hardening up the crisp edges around here to kind of exaggerate that shape, because I think it's an interesting part of the model. These things here, underneath here is where the batteries are. Let me go spacebar. Obviously I have dynamic context menu on when I hit spacebar. Snap to origin, origin to geometry to move the pivot point there. And you see underneath there, there's nothing in there. Cool, you got these things here. This is where the strap attached. And this thing here, snap to origin to geometry. It's just like that. You know, there's no point in modeling the thing to go all the way down. See, this is just an extra piece here. These little details here. And so on and so forth. This thing right here was definitely a pain. I definitely had to work very hard to get this nice and clean. Very unorthodox shape, I would call it. A lot of the biggest challenges that I was working on is just trying to get this as smooth as I could. So like this area around here, because there's so many topology changes, there's so many direction changes, and the mesh itself is just so, it's hard surface, but it's curved at the same time. So it's hard to get that right. I think in the end, I got it mostly good. Let me go ahead and mess with some other matte caps here, like this orange. Just kind of look at the surface. Sometimes I will do this. I will just go into the matte caps here and just pick different ones out and just kind of go like this. And different matte caps have a tendency to reveal different issues. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. All right, that's about all I have for today's video. If this was helpful for you at all, please let me know in the comments. I appreciate that. Hopefully just taking a look at the model was maybe educational for some of you. If it was, please consider hitting the like button for me and subscribing to the channel. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.